Hey guys, quick note. A long time ago, JM decided that he wanted to make a new podcast. So on October 6th, 2020, he sat down and recorded a new episode. It was the only episode he really recorded before he passed away. We figured not a lot of people have heard it, so we might as well present to you JM's audio from that podcast. We made a couple of cuts, but nothing of any real value was lost. We call this episode Secret Pod Casque. Hope you guys enjoy. We miss you, JM. It's nice to hear your voice again.
Intro. Welcome to Secret Podcast. Oh, busted. Welcome to Secret Podcast, hosted by John Michaels.
And two, and then go back to here. Start recording on this thing. Okay, all right. Welcome to Secret Podcast. Together on this show, we are going to dive deep into the mysteries of The Secret, a treasure hunt created by Byron Price and released by Bantam Books in 1981. And I have a varied history and pedigree with this treasure hunt. I've done a prior podcast on it, and our goal is to discuss all kinds of theories relating to this hunt, past and present, and to use our discussion of the hunt to encourage you to think about your own theories in different ways. We're also going to have a segment at the end of every show to discuss current news in the treasure sphere. We're going to update you on other treasure hunts, keep you up to date on current happenings regarding some of your favorites. Let's not get ahead of ourselves. Let me tell you what else is going on in episode 1. I'm pretty excited about what we have going on. We're going to do a lot of interesting stuff in this first episode because there's been a lot of stuff that's happened since the last time I did a podcast. Quite a few things have happened. I want to let you know in this episode we're going to take another look at Chicago, Cleveland, and especially Boston, and discuss what commonalities, if any, that they might have. We're going to discuss the recent interview with John Jude Palancar, and I didn't want to let you down on this maiden voyage, so I'm also going to spill the beans on the casque being detectable with a metal detector, as well as give you the test tone signature that it gives off when you run a metal detector over it. So, but I want to start out the first episode. I want to start out right now by dissecting the latest interview with John Jude Palancar. He said in the last interview with Josh Gates that the puzzles were being solved in the order of difficulty and the order he painted them in. And he noted that the puzzle commonly related to Manteo, or Roanoke Island, was the next one in line. So we're going to talk about Chicago, Cleveland, and Boston and see what we've learned and how that will help us moving forward. I think it's going to give people a different way to look at their own theories, and maybe some progress will be made. Who knows? Yeah, it's a lot to take in, and by hearing people talk about it, sometimes that makes things click in your head. So, I find it interesting that even though 3 casks have been found, none of the finders, or anyone else for that matter, could fully satisfy all the clues in retrospect for their respective puzzles. But even still, Rob, Brian, and Jason still found casks. Well, Jason had a lot less work to do than the rest, but still, none of those guys can fully explain all of the riddles and clues in the puzzles. I can't. I don't even know if I have them all yet. Certainly, Boston's going to be an interesting one to dive into. But, they still found the spot. They still figured out where it was. It should be noted that they found the 3 easiest ones, according to JJP. Some time's passed since Rob, Dave, and Eric found theirs, quite a bit of time. As well as Brian and Andy. It's been quite a bit of time since they found theirs. And in the past, I've taken a good look at Chicago and Cleveland and have found new things. John Palancar says there is not one way to do all of these puzzles. He says there's not one way to solve them, but there certainly do appear to be commonalities between the clues in each city. In the past, these commonalities have been attributed to a method, an A to B type scenario. I don't know if this was intended or if it was just a byproduct, but by the way of evidence, you can find a landmark given in the image or verse, at least half of them, and then you can take one road from that landmark to get to the park the treasure is in, and this road's name is somehow also included in the verse or the image in some kind of riddle. Some examples of this are St. Clair Avenue or possibly Euclid Avenue in Cleveland, leading from the Terminal Tower to the Cultural Gardens green space. Ironically, those two roads along with the green space make a triangle on a map. But anyway, there's several examples of this happening. Another one's in Milwaukee with Step on Nature cast in copper. We find it again in Charleston with King Street, where White Point Garden is, and the Pearman Bridge, and then in Manteo with Ride the Man of Oz. I mean, are all these coincidences? I would agree with John that there's not one way to do all the puzzles. There's probably 6 ways to do 12 puzzles, is what I'm guessing. So yeah, anyway, like I said, you might not be able to do all of them using one method, but there certainly are common methods, the common methods found in all of them. Yeah. So, in Chicago, the water tower's on Michigan Avenue and Chicago Avenue, ironically. Michigan is also the lake represented by the woman in the images as one of 5 ladies of the Great Lakes. If you read the plaque, you see she represents Michigan. You can take Michigan Avenue from the water tower to the Congress Hotel where you see the Bowman and on and on. So we've found ways to attribute this theory to work in Chicago, Cleveland, Charleston, Manteo, and Milwaukee, and somewhat to San Francisco, but it doesn't seem to work in Houston, New York, Florida, Montreal, Boston, or New Orleans. Matt will tell you it works for all of them, but it doesn't. At least it's an even split. It's 6 and 6. So that's where I say I would agree with John. There's probably 6 ways to do 12 because fairy secrets do come in 2s. And who knows, there might not be any kind of absolute, something that you have to consider, because I've made puzzles with people, and sometimes you get, perhaps JJP didn't know about something Byron was crafting, and to this day still does not know that something's in there. Maybe there are commonalities in all of them which Byron intended to put in without telling John. Perhaps John put a few clues in that Byron didn't know about until after the painting was done. Maybe they crafted it as a co-op. We don't know how the puzzle was made. But one has to consider that John Palancar could have had the freedom to put his own clues in the paintings. And I'm thinking he did. He doesn't often comment about the verses. I suspect that Byron made the verses on his own, and Byron's verse, along with some specific clues he had John paint in, will lead you to the treasure grounds. Then he could have given John the freedom also to add his own clues, which is maybe why we seem to find these red herrings all over the place that don't seem to fit into a theory because they were never intended to fit. Yeah, there are things, though, in that, we'll get to Boston in a minute, but I keep saying that there's a method. When JJP said there's no one method to do, I keep coming back to this because there's evidence that shows that there are methods to do some of them. There's so many commonalities between all of these that I'd be surprised if you couldn't use some of these methods in the other puzzles. At first, I thought he was teaching methods to use in the puzzles, the way he there's so many of them in there. And then there's this fairy secrets come in 2s meaning, because it doesn't just mean match a picture with a verse, because he tells you that earlier in the instructions. So what does it mean? Does it mean that each time a puzzle method is used, that it's used again in another puzzle? You might not be able to use one method to solve all 12, but I can tell you that you can use longitude and latitude lines to locate at least 10 of them for sure. And while it's not an overall method, it sure is used quite a bit. Let's take a quick break here. And when we come back, we're going to go over the clues for Chicago, Cleveland, and Boston. And we're going to spend some time talking about the Boston find and the clues for it as well. All right, so now we'll go to break. Oh, perfect.
Do you have questions? Take 2. Do you have questions? Do you have an idea about the secret you want to share? Are you looking for a team to collaborate with? Join us on Facebook. Come together with over 4,000 like-minded people who also have ideas and want to discuss the secret. You'll find info, media, and pictures. Come on over and join in the conversation. Welcome to the community.
Hang on a second. The Secret, a Treasure Hunt, created by Byron Price and released by Bantam Books in 1982. Right, I'll just have to move that to the front. Welcome back to Secret Pod Casque. Isn't that a clever little name? And yes, there is a Facebook group that the man just told you about. If you want to collaborate with other people, hop on there. We're happy to talk about the secret, happy to answer questions. There's all kinds of people on there that love talking about it every day. Right? Yeah, and we can figure out the rest later. We'll clean up the clues later. That's right. So, and speaking of clues, let's go over some of what we know and talk about some of what we don't know. Most of what we talk about is what we don't know. Anyway, the Chicago clues. Okay, and what I'm doing here is I'm kind of grouping these into types of clues and what is shared between them and what is not. Chicago. Chicago has longitude and latitude coordinates. They're in the windmill, which is attached to the water tower. Chicago image, it's also a hint for the Windy City, you think, huh? City of Broad Shoulders is also. Anyway. But there is a windmill, and it has longitude and latitude coordinates for Chicago, Illinois, contained in them. The image also includes the shape of the state of Illinois, which Chicago is located in. There's only one of them that's really exact. No, the Ohio one's still only partially a map, but the Charleston one is pretty exact. But Chicago has coordinates, includes the state shape, has a city icon. It has the Chicago Water Tower on it. The treasure grounds are not near the city icon. Right. And Michigan Avenue, there is one road from the icon to the park, and it's Michigan Avenue. The Chicago puzzle uses a city map in the image, as well as a bump on the ear and a G written in the ear to point out Grant Park. So if you found that map match of the... it's kind of like a wooden structure where she's pouring the water over onto it. Below is like a little wooden structure. Well, that exact representation is on the map of Chicago, right in the area of Grant Park. And if you stuck it right in there. So there's some maps being used. You see two statues along the way that are in the image, so you can match up two statues. One is named after Michigan Avenue. We have an image match for every riddle of the verse. In other words, there is something in the image at the place you're standing to confirm that you've solved the riddle correctly. M and B, L sits, all that cryptic stuff. There's an image match at that location to let you know, yes, you're right. Has an image match at the dig site. Although it didn't seem to tell you exactly where to dig, it was there at the dig site. And the verse, right, well, the verse also tells you where to look plainly, and counting is involved. Remember 10 by 13? Then you have the cultural connection at the treasure grounds. So many people have tried to put this together. I'm going to go with Grant was the first U.S. president to visit Ireland. I'm going to go with that one. So let's go to Cleveland now. Cleveland clues. Cleveland has longitude and latitude coordinates written plainly, real big in the middle of the image. It includes a state shape somewhat, or part of the state. Right, they're mirrored. Yeah. Well, 41, 42, 81, 81. That 1881 essentially is on the statue of George and Essu, which is part of the. We'll get to it in a minute, but that's actually on that statue. But I would have to say, yeah, the coordinates are mirrored in a, it's a puzzle in itself. Right. Well, you can't use one method to do them all. Didn't the guy tell you that? So everyone has pointed out, well, he could really have buried these in groups of threes. If you look at it, there's Montreal, New York, and Boston, which are close to each other. You have Chicago, Cleveland, Milwaukee, which are near each other. You have North Carolina, South Carolina, Florida, which are all pretty close to each other. And then you have the three that are kind of out west. Houston and New Orleans are close, and then the San Francisco one. And I'm wondering if each group of three had a easy, medium, and hard puzzle going on. I can't help to wonder. Anyway, getting off track. Cleveland, we have coordinates. We have a state shape. We have a city icon. We have the terminal tower. The treasure grounds is not near the icon. There is one road that leads from the icon to the park, but not directly. So, but anyway, there is, however you want to look at it, there you could take Superior, you could take St. Clair. St. Clair is where you go from the view of the terminal tower that you see in front of the Fountain of Eternal Life, which also has a giant sphere there. St. Clair does not connect directly with the terminal tower, but it does connect directly to the statue of George and Essu, which is right by where everything is with the wall and all that. On the same hand, Euclid Avenue does connect directly to the terminal tower, but then it doesn't connect on the other end. So, I mean, you have an image match going one way. I don't know, but just saying. And from what I've seen, something unique about that puzzle is it only seems to have one riddle in it beneath two countries. And you can confirm that by two image matches and at two locations, the start or the end. I think that's interesting. Right. Well, so we have coordinates, state shape, city icon, treasure grounds not near the icon, one road that leads there. We have two statues in the image, possibly two statues, one for certain. Cleveland includes a self-referential line in the verse, seek the columns for the search, referring directly to the painting. The verse tells you where to look. Counting is involved, except it's backwards. There is an image match at the dig site. From the evidence we have, the cask lid seems to show a daytime setting. I don't know, maybe there's 3 types of cask lids. I don't know. And there's a cultural reference at the treasure grounds, the Creek Cultural Gardens. So, and up until last year, these were the only 2 found, and these were the things that were the same in both of them. We find 2 that works somewhat similar, and we think, oh, okay, this is how you do these things. And we somehow found ways that some of this stuff applies in other puzzles, and then lo and behold, here comes Boston. and it gets solved, and everybody is like, what? It was where? But wait, it's interesting because it was maybe easier than we all thought. Let's go over the clues first. The Boston clues. You have, debatable longitude and latitude coordinates. I say there's only 2. The 42, 2 numbers. It uses a zip code to point out the region of the city. Oh no, that was spotted a long time ago. People. Oh yeah, totally. I was talking about it with Chris Preacher years ago, And it just never went anywhere because we were so stuck on, well, we got to find the path and we have to find the icon, I was in the North End going, okay, well, what do you do? And I feel like an idiot because wait till we get to the end of this here. So it uses a zip code to point out the region. There's no identifiable city icon match. There's JJP claims Boston Pops. That's not really an icon. There's a nod to the globe, so Boston Globe could be represented, but there's a nod to a famous piece of artwork that he tags Copley, that was the painter for Copley Square. But there's no dead-on match to a city icon that you can say, well, this is this, okay? It has no identifiable path whatsoever. So it has no identifiable path. It has a self-referential line. All the letters are here to see, which we didn't even know until after it was found. It does have an image match at the dig site. It has several, in my opinion, which I'll show. It does not appear to have a state shape. I looked all over for Massachusetts, even the kind of boot shape of the cape and everything. I couldn't find it, but the shadow on the neck does match the shoreline of the North End. I'll say that, is if we're looking for maps, but I didn't see a state shape. It possibly uses mass transit as a path, totally unconfirmed. The cultural reference is present at the dig site, and we know that's important. It references a historical event, the Midnight Ride of Paul Revere. There's references to these obscure letters from Horace Walpole to Horace Mann, disguising the word north, which is clearly important. From the evidence, we have the cask lid shows a nighttime setting. Okay, so let me just say, clearly, all three of these puzzles are not the same. No, in Boston, we have a verse which gives you no clear geographical location other than alluding to two names on the Boston Public Library, in a riddle which itself alludes to some historical letters between the two Horaces. There's no street name to find, no path, no breadcrumbs along the way. There's no Christopher Columbus. That's not a thing. Instead, we have an obscure verse covered in riddles and historical allusions and cryptic image matches like the Copley painting reference, none of which are in the North End. But in its simplest terms, all you had to do was find the zip code, find the home plate, and then find all the baseball fields in the North End, near the Old North Church, which was also a clue, and which one is dedicated to an Italian American before the secret was made. It was that easy to find the treasure grounds. Follow the clues. If you have Boston, North End, Old North Church, baseball, Italian. If I just gave you those 5 clues, would you have found that baseball field? Well, it said right in the verse, "In truth be free." But let me tell you, Chicago does not work like that. Or does it? I mean, once you decode everything, you have Water Tower, Michigan, Mozart and Beethoven, Congress, Roosevelt, behind Lincoln, 10 by 13. Could you have found that area if you knew those clues? Then comes the... Right, so you look at these, and I've been saying this for a long time. You have to do it like a puzzle. So you look at these, and you decode all these clues, and you get these words. And then if you just use those words, where do you end up? In the city. It then comes the dilemma of being sure that the riddles were solved correctly, though. Because how would you have known that was Mozart and Beethoven if you didn't know, if you weren't there to know that it was verified? In hindsight, you can be like, oh yeah, if I had all those clues, and those were the clues in the puzzle, well, why didn't we find this earlier? Because you don't know if you got the clues right. I mean, does take 5 steps in his direction refer to the 5-digit zip code in the painting? Does it refer to 5 stops on the T? And if so, from where? And how do you know? Does it mean take 5 steps from home plate if third base is north of X marks the spot? I think that they may be a little simpler than that. I think that there was some kind of puzzle in there telling you where to go from home plate And that's what you do. Now, I've found some things out about Boston, some interesting image matches, which I will post on our Facebook group. There's an equipment container along the fence of the third base side, which resembled the structure of the bottom left part of the image. And in the image, you see 3 spheres. The bottom right one is on a pedestal. Now, if you look directly behind home plate, you'll see 3 round balls on pedestals as a vehicle barrier on the street. And they've been there all the way going back as far as any pictures that I've seen. So, that possible image matches that were overlooked, who knows? There's also an interesting match getting off of when you get off the T at the Boston Garden, which is the North End station. When you walk out, the view of the city skyline looks very, very much like the little image on the box that Pandora is the witch Pandora is holding. Right. They're in order. Yeah. Yeah, it's crazy. What we've found with the treasure grounds is that usually BP will describe an area or give instructions that only make sense when you're in the correct spot. He also uses riddles which only make sense if we apply them to the correct area, like the North Point Lighthouse in Milwaukee. Otherwise, they're ambiguous. They can be interpreted to mean whatever the imagination will handle, and that's why these things are so easy yet so hard. If T is north of X, take 5 steps in his direction. If we look at a baseball field, we have home, first, second, and third marking positions. Take 5 steps, that's TFS, third, first, second. Anyway, it's easy to find all these correlations after you know. I think they were created for whoever wanted to solve them because you can get to a city without the use of the internet, for sure. You could go to the library, look up coordinates on a map and recognize things. And, I think people who really wanted to get into it could have done it. I don't think the Forrest Fenn treasure was put out there for people who are only in Wyoming, Certainly easier if you lived in the city, but I think about Mark and down in Houston and how much he knew how much he knew Herman Park and how often he was there, and I don't know, it's funny how easy they are in retrospect and then how hard they appear to be in real life. Anyway, hopefully people have taken a new look at things based on what we've just said. We'll provide some pictures and kind of evidence to show what we were talking about in the episode on the Facebook group. But for right now, let's close out this section. And all right, everybody, thank you for tuning in and listening to our maiden voyage. There's only one thing left to do, which is the coup de grace, which is to explain about my little adventure with a metal detector. No one has heard anything about this yet, and the reason being is, well, I dropped a little hint on one of the Facebook pages, and I just got busy and kind of forgot about it. But I do have it, and that is, yeah. So a buddy of mine from out west, from out near San Francisco, flew in, and he brought with him this $high-dollar, like, super primo metal detector that can, detect things from the 1800s or whatever, 30 feet down. So it was really powerful metal detector, and we wanted to do a little test, and also he wanted to meet Rob and everything, so I set this thing up, and we drove down to Chicago and hung out with Rob, and he got to meet him and see the cask and all that stuff. So it was a big day for him. So what we did is we took Rob's cask, and we put it on the ground in an area where there was nothing, where the detector wasn't hitting anything underneath it previously. And we put it on the ground. And the whole thing with metal detectors is you don't have to bury something. There doesn't have to be actual dirt in between the detector and the box that you're trying to detect, because what the metal detector does is it just takes the dirt out of the equation anyway. So
Okay, quick editor's note here. That's not how metal detectors work. What John just said is not completely accurate.
What we did was we just held the metal detector up about a foot, 2 foot off the ground and swept it across and got a reading. But it was a light reading. You can get a reading, but it was a light reading. So then we lowered it to go right over the cask to give the full reading of what you get, what you're going to hear if you run a metal detector over the cask. And here's the big surprise. You ready for the surprise? Here's the big surprise. It's a 2-tone signal. Right, so you get one tone that is definitely different than another to 2 different kinds of metal inside of it.
So like editor's note again, that's not what 2 tones, like what he's describing, that's not what that means. That doesn't necessarily mean it's 2 different types of metal.
That's what I'm guessing, is the lid and the key are 2 different kinds of metal for some reason, which would be strange. I mean, I'm sure that metal detectors of the 80s couldn't have found that, but no, he doesn't have the key, but I had one. Yeah, so are you ready? I'll put the video on Facebook, but here is the audio signal that the original treasure cask gives off from a metal detector. All right, I'm going to have to edit it. Sorry. So, I hope you've enjoyed all of this entertainment that we've brought to you on this first episode. My name's John Michaels, and we're out of here until next time. And we are out of here until next time. You can check us out online on Facebook or anywhere that we post, right?
Outro, take 2. Thanks for listening to Secret Pod Casque. We are not affiliated with the website 12 Treasures, Pokemon Go, New Coke, The Clapper, MC Hammer, My Sleep Pillow, The McRib, Reebok Pumps, Zubaz, or anything colored in mauve or fuchsia. Secret Pod Casque is full of vitamins, contains no trans fat, is gluten-free, has 0 calories, no additives or preservatives. It's all natural, farm to table, and is organically sourced to provide you with the maximum entertainment. Join in the conversation on Facebook.